Las cosas que necesito en la vida ya están aquí. Las cosas.
I am sitting here with Katherine O'Flynn, and she is in London. So welcome, Katherine.
Thank you very much, Lee.
I am thrilled to have you here. We met, it was just last week or so, and I don't know how, but I was not aware of the services that you were offering. And Mark David Walsh had walked, and he and I, he's a longtime friend of the Camino Cafe Podcast. And he said, "Hey, Lee, have you ever been over to Mass over at the Pilgrim Center? And have you gone over to see Katherine and do one of the Pilgrim circles?" And I said, "No." I said, "I think someone's mentioned it, but I'm not really familiar with it." And he said, "You got to go." And so he connected the two of us, and I did just that. And I was just so impressed with what I found, and I really enjoyed our conversation. And as we talked, we said, "Hey, we got to talk about this on the Camino Cafe so others can find out about it." So thanks for coming and being willing to share the story of Camino Companions.
No, I'm very happy to do that, and delighted that you offered me this possibility, Lee.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. So let's back up. I know that you and I have talked about it, but I want our viewers and listeners to hear your own personal story about when you first decided that you were going to walk the Camino. Can you take us back to that moment and what kind of sparked the idea that, I'm going to actually go and walk this pilgrimage?
Well, I'm a religious sister, just to put things in context. And I had heard about the Camino for years. I think particularly in the 1990s, I lived in Ireland, and a group from Ireland who were raising funds for MS regularly went as a fundraiser, and some of the folks who were suffering from MS joined them. So it was one of those things that I was familiar with. And somewhere at the back of my mind, I thought one day, somehow, somewhere, I'm going to do this. And then I was in leadership in my congregation, the Faithful Companions of Jesus. And eventually in 2014, I finished after many years, and I had a chance for a sabbatical. And number one was to walk the Camino. And I just knew, never doubted it. It was just something I definitely wanted to do. So I did my preparation, got my gear. In fact, a strange thing, I was in London by this time. I went into the CSJ shop in London, and a guy there was more than helpful, even to the extent of following me around to one of the outdoor shops when I was buying my backpack and helped me to choose. And I met him a month ago in Santiago.
Oh, wow.
So it's just one of those extraordinary things that the Camino keeps on bringing people together, and there's something about the spirit of it. But anyhow, I set off on the Camino, and I think a big part of what I wanted was to end the 20 plus years I'd been in leadership, which have been challenging, enjoyable in lots of ways, gave me an opportunity to meet our sisters in many different parts of the world. But it was good to just bring that part of my life to an end, and to in some way think about, we use the word discern, what might be the next step in my life? Where was I going? My congregation had ideas, but I just wanted to have time to think about that as well. And as I walked, I met so many wonderful people, but as we all know, with so many amazing stories and some very challenging, hard stories.
Yes.
And I just was so struck by one man in particular coming down from the Cruz de Ferro, who talked with me about what he'd left up there, but by many other people whom I felt were searching, maybe wondering what life was all about, and just quite puzzled at times by what this journey of life, or the journey of the Camino, is really about. And as I got closer and closer to Santiago, that just became more and more of a feeling inside me. I would love to be able to, in some way, work with folks at the end of their Camino. My background is I have a training in psychotherapy and also in spiritual direction. And then I got to the cathedral, where I had volunteered to help with the Mass in English. At that time, Mass in English happened in a little side chapel, So I was working there for about 10 days, welcoming folks and going out for coffee with them after Mass. And I just had a sense that it was lovely to meet people, and the Mass I could see was important for folks, but some people needed a quieter space to debrief, to unpack, to really just talk with each other and with other people about what this really meant for them. So I came back to my religious order, and there began Camino Companions. So my Camino really led me to beginning this new project in Santiago. My Camino, which was searching a little bit for my next steps, led me to take that initiative. My Camino itself was very beautiful. I walked some of it on my own. One of my sisters and her husband joined me for a few days, and a good friend joined me for the last stretch into Santiago. And in lots of ways, I would have been happy to walk a lot of it on my own, even though I appreciated the friendship and the family time. But I think there is something really special when you walk alone. You meet people in a different context, have different conversations. But I have to say, it was a very special moment for me.
Wow. So this was 2014?
Exactly.
What is it about the Camino? I've heard of a lot of people walking when they are at this point of some type of transition, retirement, something has changed in their life and they kind of bookend it. What is it about the Camino, in your opinion, or for yourself, made it so powerful as a way to help you decide what was going to be next?
I think walking in quiet, in beauty, meeting other people, somehow or other opens your mind up to a bigger world. But I think the act of walking, in one sense, it's about movement and transition, and you're leaving something behind you and you're going somewhere. So I think that very act of leaving and moving towards is something the Camino encapsulates. And then you're living in the now. You eventually get into the rhythm of just being in the space for the day. And I think that helps things to surface inside you and allows your dreams to come up, and maybe, just gets rid of some of the stuff that you don't need in your life, and allows what your really deep desires to surface. And for me, because I suppose prayer is an important part of my life, my prayer, often was just without words, just gazing at beauty or reflecting on the absolute magnificence of the human persons that I was meeting. It wasn't saying words at all by any means, but it was somehow having a sense that God was in all of this and was accompanying me and accompanying all of them in their very, very different realities. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're saying that so well. I mean, I don't know if I had been so eloquent, but I think that's how I feel when I'm walking. It's like a walking prayer. And I love how you're saying it's that leaving behind and then going forward towards something, which is the very thing that we're doing when we're in transition. And so how beautiful, you're coming down Cruz de Ferro, you're having a conversation with someone. And at that moment, things start kind of spinning in your head that, because there's no way you had never walked before. So there was no way that Camino Companions could have been in your mind prior to this, right?
Not at all. No, it never entered my mind. And in fact, it just got stronger and stronger as I got closer to Santiago. And while I was in the cathedral, meeting again wonderful pilgrims and having an opportunity, as I say, to have coffee with them, but knowing that, something quieter, maybe something that is a bit less noisy than some of the cafes in Santiago, where you're putting up more chairs and trying to fit all the people in and trying to make sure people can hear each other, just a different space. So I suppose looking for a space where something different could happen.
And just that, I witnessed that personally when I went to the circle. And I do think that is something that people are searching for when they arrive in Santiago, because it can be a rather stimulating environment, right? There's the cafes, you've got your Camino family, and you're meeting up with people, and it can be very loud. But if you search it out, there are quiet nooks, and you certainly provide a space for that. And so we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So this was 2014. How long did it take before you actually then opened the door and you started offering these services from the time you left your Camino to that time?
The following April, we were there, April 2015.
Wow.
So, yeah, it moved quite quickly. I went home and shared my dream and got the green light to try it and see how it would go. And then I went back after Christmas, January the 6th, I think, with two of our sisters who explored possibilities with me. Some of our younger sisters, more than one, had actually gone to Santiago a number of times. And they had been very aware of the need for some kind of accompaniment as well. But at that point, they were doing other things in their lives. And there was no way that, they were able to pull out of their other ministries and go to Santiago. But a lot of our sisters do come for 2 or 3 weeks or longer over the summer, and we have lots of lay volunteers. But we got going by April 2015, which was wonderful.
That's pretty remarkable to put that idea out there and then be running that closely. That's wonderful. Did you face any kind of challenges or obstacles in opening the center?
Well, one of the difficulties was finding a quiet space. Now, the dean of the cathedral at that time, Don Segundo, he was aware that the Germans were there welcoming people, the Dutch were there welcoming people, the French were beginning something. It hadn't fully taken off, but it was there in embryo. And he knew that English language pilgrims also needed something. So he was very happy to, in some way, provide a space. So the first space we got was upstairs in the old pilgrim office in Rue de Villar. And it was in a corridor where some of the office employees walked through occasionally. Now, they were very respectful, but you didn't quite know when the door might open. And then we also were very fortunate in a nearby university residence in Rua Nova. We were given a room where we also brought people, and it was a less kind of frenetic sort of space. It was quiet, and we just walked over. It was less than 5 minutes walk from Rue de Villar to Rua Nova. They're parallel, and that space was lovely. But we had the little corridor space as well, where sometimes just a casual, somebody comes up for 20 minutes, they don't exactly want to spend 5 minutes going anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So you now, though, are in the new Pilgrim Center, and you have a lovely space. And so for those that aren't aware, so there is an English Mass that is given by Father Manny on Monday, every day but Wednesday. Is that correct? At 10:30, and that Mass is in English, and it's the chapel is just lovely, which I will show later here on our program. But so Father Manny offers the Mass, and I know that you and any of the other volunteers kind of help with that. So we'll talk a bit about that. And then the actual closing circle. I'm not sure how you refer to what happens upstairs. What do you call when the folks are invited upstairs for tea?
Sharing pilgrim stories.
Okay. Yeah. And so that's held upstairs at the Pilgrim Center in your own space. So how did it come about that you kind of overlapped with Father Manny and became involved with that? Because I think at one time he was offering Mass somewhere else. He's the chaplain. Maybe explain a little bit that, because I don't know if I'm going to say it correctly.
Sure, no problem at all. For a number of years, Mass was offered in a side chapel in the cathedral.
Okay.
And John Raftery, who's known to many people in Santiago and many pilgrims, he actually took the initiative to start bringing priests, English language priests. And over a number of summers, he had priests who lived in Santiago and offered Mass in English. And I worked with John, and I learned a lot from the style of welcome that they had initiated in that little chapel in the cathedral.
Yeah.
And then when we came back and we were going to offer something a bit longer, we used to go to the Mass in English and invite people after Mass if they wanted to come for coffee and go off to one of the cafes with them. And gradually then people would get to know us, and we kind of talked about what we were offering. Because as well as that circle and sharing of stories after Mass, we have offered sessions, what we call formal and informal sessions. Mm-hmm. The informal sessions are when a pilgrim is downstairs and just feels, I want to pop upstairs and see if there's anybody who's going to talk with me in English. And hopefully they've seen one of our posters and they've heard about us from somebody, and they just pop in and they might stay, as I said, 20 minutes, half an hour. But then currently at 3:00 every afternoon, we invite people who want to spend a longer time chatting.
Yes.
Because after Mass, for some people, like they had plans to go and meet some friends, or they had other things they wanted to do. So they're not necessarily going to spend, more than half an hour, 40 minutes, even though sometimes, amazingly, it does go on longer. But in the afternoon, the whole idea is to give people more time to have a formal kind of debriefing session, sharing session. And whatever suits people, we go along with, Sometimes people come up for 5 minutes just to ask us something. And the other thing, Lee, and I don't know if you got to see it the day you visited, we have a video in the chapel. And some years ago, you didn't get to see that. Well, next time you put over, you might be able to see it. Some years ago, we were asked if we would do a prayer in the chapel. It was the Taizé prayer, usually at 4:30 in the chapel, and we started off doing a prayer early in the morning, but nobody was coming because for the most part, if pilgrims wanted to do something in the morning, they went to Mass, or they certainly weren't going to show up early. I think we were 9:00, 9:30. So we began to realize this is not going to work. So we asked if we could do a video that could run all day. So we created a little 15-minute reflection video that is based on the Beatitudes of the Pilgrim, which many pilgrims know. And it just goes through them, and it has some nice, quiet, reflective music and poses some questions, lots of Camino scenes in the background. And now in this present time, that video is put on after the Mass, about 11:30, and it runs right through until after the Taizé prayer. And then once the Taizé prayer is over at 5:00, it's put on again. So it runs through until the office closes. So anybody visiting the chapel can come in and sit there quietly. The music is quite conducive to just reflection. And we have it in English and Spanish. So lots of Spanish pilgrims come as well.
No, I didn't see that because when I got to Mass, it wasn't playing because Mass was starting. And then I went to the Taizé prayer, and that was just getting ready to start. So yes, I will have to pop over and check that out purposely. That sounds beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful space, a beautiful chapel.
A lovely, lovely chapel, a lovely spot. And, a lot of pilgrims come in there, and I've often gone in there and found somebody in tears, or I have found somebody just wrapped in wonder. And I sometimes, as we say, loiter with intent. And as somebody is coming out, I say, are you okay? Would you like a conversation? Do you want a cup of coffee or a cup of tea? As a friend of mine said, all sorts of strange and wonderful things happen over a cup of tea or coffee. Lots of people say, no, I'm fine. And then you will have somebody who will say, yes, I'd love that, So it's another opportunity for people just to come and talk about their joys or their sorrows.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I was thinking about that day that I came over that, as pilgrims, sometimes we arrive and we don't even know what emotion might come to us the moment we arrive. And of course, we've walked this distance to this cathedral. And as English speakers and possibly not Spanish speakers, we can go to Mass, but we might know, the timing of things as Mass is happening, and, but we really can't maybe understand the language. And so I really thought it was beautiful that here's this space over at the Pilgrim Center where you can enjoy a Mass in English, But I also wanted to make sure that we point out that this is for people of all faiths can come to this Mass and can come upstairs and enjoy the tea and the pilgrim sharing, right?
Absolutely. We've been delighted actually to welcome Jews, Muslims, people of no faith at all, and Christians of all denominations. And I'm quite sure we've had Buddhists as well, because we've had another number of Asians. So we've had all faiths, and our emphasis is on the human person and the journey. And yes, if somebody begins to articulate that somehow the transcendent God is significant in their lives, of course we address that, but we don't in any way demand that somebody must have a particular belief or any belief. We really want to be there with the human person on the journey, because I believe God is right there in that. God is in everybody's journey.
Yes, the human person is the focus. How many pilgrims would you say have come through the doors of Camino Companions since you first opened that April in 2015?
Gosh, that would be very hard to say. It would be a total guesstimate. You know, on a busy day, we could have up to 30, 40. You know, now that we were very busy 2018, 2019. We had particularly in the month of June, September, October, they were particularly busy times. July, August are often a bit less busy because people are nervous of the heat, and you know, just don't, particularly English language pilgrims don't want to venture into the heat. But you do, nevertheless, we stay open through July and August. And I know my colleagues who are there at the moment tell me there have been people coming every day. Now at this time, and we think some of it is post-pandemic and people are still a bit nervous of COVID, and there's been some COVID around, the numbers would often be maybe 10, 15, that kind of a number across the day. And occasionally maybe even less. You can have a very quiet day. But you know, I often say it's not about numbers, because your encounter with one person may be so powerful that it's more important than if there was a queue at the door all day, you know? And some of the casual encounters coming into my mind as we're talking, I remember a young man once walked out with his Compostela, and I happened to be standing outside the door, and I knew by his face that there was a sadness. And I just said to him, "Congratulations, how are you?" And he said, "I'm not sure." And I said, "Do you want to come and have a chat?" And we had a most powerful chat about his Camino, which he had done on a bicycle in memory of his mother. He was a doctor, so he couldn't get time off from work. So that was why he cycled from his hometown in Germany. And because he cycled and cycled pretty quickly, he didn't meet a lot of people. And just that wonderful conversation, he just needed a place to talk about this journey that he had done in memory of his mother, who had died the year before. And that was unplanned. And for me, you know, that's encounter stands out. And as I say, you know, it's more significant than if there had been a queue knocking down the wall or the knocking down the door trying to get in. But so you never know.
Did you feel at that moment it was one of those moments when you're like, yeah, this is why I was called to do this?
You know, that happens to me over and over, Lee. And I've gone down there some mornings, and particularly if it's been very hot weather and, you know, you mightn't sleep that well and you're a bit kind of groggy in the morning. And I think, oh dear Lord, what am I doing? And then I meet a pilgrim, and it's as if a light goes on. And obviously, if it's somebody with a very powerful story, you sort of say, I know why I'm here. And I have said that so many times. And pilgrims feed back to us. We're not there for positive feedback. We're there just to be there. But pilgrims often say, and sometimes I sort of wonder why it was so significant for somebody. Just the other day, an email from somebody who he and his wife visited, and they said it was the most important part of their Camino. Now, I was amazed to hear that and very encouraged. And then he was very keen that we would tell more people about it, because that actually is one of our challenges, that we're not known. And even though we've been there a long time, because the pilgrim population is so changing, and pilgrims are often so tired, they don't get around to reading a notice. So that is the ongoing question that we have. How do we let those pilgrims who would like to avail of this service, how do we let them know we exist? So I'm hoping this podcast might just capture a few of those folks.
Yeah, I sure hope so. And, I just wanted to say to folks that are listening or watching this interview, if you know someone who is an English speaker that's getting ready to walk, we would sure appreciate if you would pass on, share this video or share this interview with them so that they are aware. And I know that you have a Facebook page, which I will have a link on the show notes. And is there anything else that the general pilgrim community, because I'm hearing the same things, everyone that has visited with you is just delighted. The experience has been very, very positive for them. The folks that I met during the pilgrim sharing, I could just see the glow on their faces and how touched they were by being able to share, as well as hearing the other stories that were shared that day. I mean, I was certainly touched. What kinds of things do you think we could do to help? Is it sharing on Facebook? Is there something that you're kind of, I just wish people would help us in this way?
Well, I think certainly sharing on Facebook. I don't do Instagram, and maybe we should. That's an awareness I have. And any of the networks where pilgrims tend to browse or look for information. We have put up some information some time ago on the Camino forum. But again, like everything, information that you put,
yes,
it moves to the back because other information keeps coming.
Exactly.
And you almost need to know what you're searching for before you find it. But I think anyway, I suppose word of mouth is very powerful. But if there are networks or Facebook pages that people are part of, just to post our posters every so often, just to let folks know that we exist, and even giving them a timetable, because again, interestingly, the cathedral before used to have some clearer signs, but I think since they've done the renovation, some of those signs and notices aren't as evident.
Yes.
I think people go to the cathedral expecting to find the information and don't often find it.
You're right. I don't even know if this is on the Mass sign. When you walk through the Holy Door right now, there's the media screen that will have the Mass at the cathedral, but I don't recall seeing anything on any other locations, but maybe I've just missed it. But you're right. I live here in Santiago, and look, it took somebody coming from around the world to tell me that this was going on. And so I don't know how I had even missed it. I've been craving, I don't speak English or Spanish very well. English is even a challenge, obviously, just now. But, I've been craving a Mass in English. And so it's just been a lovely find just for me personally, but also seeing the power of really giving people closure and that closure of their Camino walk, as well as preparation for returning back to wherever they've come from after Camino. And I talk about that all the time here on the podcast. I think that's so important because it's that turnaround point that is, the Camino doesn't end in Santiago, it continues. No. You're a perfect example of taking your walk and then paying it forward through service and actually creating something. Like I just find that absolutely amazing and yet not surprising, because I'm seeing that happen quite a bit with the Camino. Now you have quite a few volunteers that have helped you over the years. And what's your thought on how many volunteers have helped you since the start of this? Because I think you have two kind of always on staff with you on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, we have 3 people there as far as possible. At the very beginning, we were just 2.
Okay.
I think for about maybe the first 3 years, we managed with 2. But then it became evident that, it would be better if we had 3. We needed to give time for people to get a break during the week and even a break during the day. So I think probably in 2017, we went up to 3 volunteers. And volunteers do a 2-week shift.
Okay.
Some of them are pilgrims who have shown interest. We usually ask for a certain, capacity before we welcome people. It may be ideally some training in listening skills or some capacity to welcome others. Obviously, because we live in a small flat together, that's important. People need to be able to cope with that. It's quite a small space. So I have a list of the kind of, what should I say, the challenges of doing the work, but also the gifts and the joys of doing it. But I have never added the number of volunteers because we have some who come every year.
Yeah. I think the ladies that I met have been there numerous times, right? And they are just so full of joy that day. You can see that they love doing this work.
Absolutely. And we have a number who come. We had a woman who came from the US over several years. We have an Australian woman who's coming back for her 3rd or 4th time in September, I think. And we often have one of our sisters there because we are aware that, we have to maintain contact with the landlord, and we maintain some kind of formal contact with the Pilgrim office if they want something, from us. So we try to have somebody who at least knows the situation very well, or who will be able to take some responsibility. And then at the moment, because of our flat situation, we have predominantly female volunteers, but we have some men who are very keen on volunteering. And we have had some who've either come and lived somewhere else in Santiago, or at one time we were in a different flat where we had an ensuite, which unfortunately we don't have now. But we would like to be a bit more gender balanced. So we're going to look at that, but just the challenges of finding accommodation is one of the things we need to work with.
Yeah, especially as crowded as it can get here.
Exactly.
So if somebody listening or watching this interview says, this sounds like something I would like to volunteer and possibly do someday, how would they go around getting a hold of you, or is there an application process? How would they go about that?
We have our email address, which is on our poster.
Okay.
It's, I can call it out to you, or maybe at some point.
I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. So if they were just to email you and maybe share their Camino experience.
CaminoCompanions@gmail.com. So it's very straightforward.
Good. Okay.
We usually do the schedule in January.
Okay.
For the following year. And we have an application form, and we send out a list of, the kind of conditions of volunteering. And we just take it from there, really.
Okay. Yeah. So when I was there, I noticed you had a lot of pamphlets and some beautiful prayer cards and other kinds of cards to give out. So I'm going to show those later on in the interview, but I wondered if maybe you could kind of speak to some of the things that you hand out and maybe some of the things that really are meaningful to you particularly.
Well, when we started off, the sister who worked with me at the beginning had a great love for poetry, as do I, but she just loved finding new poems, and particularly poems that might be linked with the whole idea of journey, or searching, or, life and its ups and downs. So we started looking for poems, because while we occasionally offered people a piece of scripture, we were aware for those of no faith, and actually for many people of faith, poetry speaks very powerfully as well. Yes. And it can open up something for people that can be quite refreshing and, quite inspiring. So over the years, we've gathered poems by, people like David White, John O'Donoghue, Mary Oliver, Jan Richardson. Jan Richardson has a beautiful one that we use. If you could see the journey whole, you might never undertake it.
I'm not familiar with that work. The others I am, and I noticed on your Facebook, I'm a huge David White fan, and John O'Donoghue, and so I saw those, and I think I recall seeing them when I was upstairs at the office. But no, I'm not familiar with that one. That is beautiful.
And we have some by Rumi, whom you might be familiar with.
Yes.
There's a Buddhist monk who died just this past year, Thich Nhat Hanh. You know, we have a variety of reflections, and we try very quickly at the end of the sharing circle to identify a few that might be helpful for folks. Sometimes trying to link what has been said or shared with the poems. And then other days, just trusting whatever we give, people will put it in their pockets and they'll put it out on their journey home or 6 months later or whenever, and it might just speak to them. So we have quite a large folder of poetry, and we look at that as another resource just to give people a little doggy bag as they leave us, and something to chew over when they get home.
I love that, a doggy bag to take home. That's wonderful. I'm sorry that we're now in 2 different locations. So when I go over and do the tour that I'll show on the interview a little bit later, that you won't be there. But I wanted to talk to you about, there was over on as you were facing towards the cathedral, let's say, over on the side, there was a little place where people could leave stones, I believe, or maybe leave notes. Could you talk a little bit about that space there in your office and what it's about?
Well, we call it a sacred space. And over the years, every so often, you'll have somebody who'll say, I still have my stone. And for some reason or other, the moment didn't come for them to leave it anywhere. And we say, well, look, if this is the moment, if you would like, would you like to leave it in our sacred space? And very often, one of us might go over quietly to the sacred space and stand with the person and maybe just say something, or just silently let them place their stone. And another custom that has developed is, now I know mortuary cards are very popular in Ireland. They're sort of memorial cards when somebody dies, but some countries they wouldn't be quite as popular. But just when I was there this past time, I don't know, was it the morning you were there? Maybe not, Lee. There was a family with some young kids, and the dad had lost his brother, and he had brought the memorial card with him, and I knew he needed to leave it somewhere. And I think it's part of, you know, just being able to end, and it's part of the grieving, part of, you know, honoring the person whom they've remembered. Because an old practice on the Camino is that people do it for people who've died or people who are incapable of walking. I believe in the very early times, people used to pay others to do it for them. That was when they were doing all of these crazy indulgences and things that were all a bit unusual and strange. But it's evolved into modern times where people, if they wish, on their Compostela can have the name of their loved one or the person who may be so ill they're not able to walk. And we link up with that a little bit by just providing that space where people can leave something. We had another gorgeous experience some years ago where 2 people, a man and a woman, were walking the Camino, and they had both lost their partner. And it was known by pilgrims, as the folklore can travel up and down the Camino, that these 2 people were walking and that they were both wearing the ring of their partner. So they had 2 rings on their index finger. And one night at a pilgrim meal, this man and woman were sitting side by side, and they noticed, gosh, he's wearing 2 rings and I'm wearing 2, she's wearing 2 rings. So they were the couple who had both lost partners. He was from South Africa. He was from New York. She was from South Africa. So they walked together to Santiago and supported one another. I think they met somewhere around Astorga, exchanged wonderful stories. There was no way it was the beginning of a relationship. They were both very settled in their lives, had families, but offered each other tremendous support. And when they came to Santiago, they wanted to leave something as a kind of a memory of their loved one. And both came together to leave something on that sacred space.
Wow.
So that was just a moment that I remember, just one of those very touching moments. And they got a chance as well to talk about what the journey had meant for them and the gift that they were to one another.
That is a beautiful story.
Mm.
Wow, I just think what a blessing it must feel like for you to be able to hold the space that you're holding for these stories, as well as people leaving things in the sacred space. It just, I'm really touched by this whole story of what started for you during this Camino, when you could have chosen so many other paths at this point. I mean, you had done so many things in your career, and look what this has led to. It's just a beautiful story.
Yes, my regret is I can't be there all the time, because my community, and I am, very understanding, have other tasks that they want me to do as well, other ministries. So I do have to come back to London now a bit more. But Alethea, who's another sister and who's Spanish born, and she works as a university chaplain. So she gets a good long summer holiday and she spends a lot of time there. And she's a great support to me because she knows the local culture, knows the local scene, and is very, very organized as well. So we work together, the two of us, in organizing the schedule and in coordinating the volunteers and all of that. And she's actually much more present now than I am, just because of other ministries I've been asked to do by the congregation.
Right. Well, I can see why they want you in all these different roles. I mean, seeing you in action that day, your skills in running the Pilgrim Sharing Circle were just amazing. From a leadership perspective, I just really admired how you handled everything that happened that day that I witnessed. It was beautiful. And I wanted to say and ask you, I guess, you've done so much already with Camino Companions. What is left? What's your dream as far as where you would like to take this? Are there other things you'd like to see happen with it?
Well, I guess if the numbers come back on the Camino again, and if we really are able to, it would be very nice to expand to a second room. Now, in 2018 and 19, we were able to use a second room in the Pilgrim office periodically when our numbers were large, and because we don't want any of those sharing circles to be much more than 8 or 10, because it becomes too much, and the kind of intimacy goes when your numbers are too big. And I guess now, whether it would ever happen or not, and this year there isn't need for it because the numbers are not as big, but we might be able to use a second room and perhaps increase our number of volunteers, and I think a way of making ourselves known might be we could be wandering around, loitering with intent in various places. And some people enjoy that and others find it hard going because, you're there and you're trying to engage with people. But it's amazing what sometimes those casual encounters can do. Even sometimes somebody doesn't come upstairs. I've met people in the garden and I've had, 20-minute, half an hour conversations that have been very powerful.
Well, yeah, and I was thinking about coming into the Pilgrim Center. People are so focused on getting out Compostela, right? You're getting the QR code and you're getting the appointment time, and you could just really race past all of this, right? And go in, get your Compostela, and then you're kind of celebrating, and you kind of head out. You might not even notice this beautiful chapel. The gardens in the back of the center are gorgeous. I mean, the whole space is lovely. But I think we kind of might have our blinders on as we're so focused on that Compostela. So yeah, I think anything we can do.
I think that's one of the challenges. In fact, I was talking with one of our volunteers this morning on a WhatsApp call, and she said, it looks as if they're getting a PhD when they get their Compostela, the joy and the delight and the whole, which is wonderful. But I agree with you that somehow or other, it would be lovely to get it into the bloodstream of the pilgrims that, yes, the Compostela is important and it shows what you've done. But actually sort of processing the experience is also very important. We often use that quotation from T.S. Eliot. We had the experience, but missed the meaning.
We had the experience, but missed the meaning. That could definitely happen on Camino, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that not everybody, is in for a deeper meaning, but I am convinced that people who come as tourists often leave as pilgrims. I've seen that too many times. And I've heard another woman who had lost her daughter many, many years before, and she had to make a choice between a cruise and the Camino. And she chose the Camino and wasn't ever sure quite why. And then at the end of what was mostly a very casual chat about albergues and hotels and good meals, she lit a candle for her daughter. And she looked at me and she said, "Now I know why I walked the Camino."
How did you feel in that moment?
I was overwhelmed, overcome. Yeah. Because up to then the conversation had been, light and friendly and chatty. And then when she lit the candle, somehow or other, the realization why she chose the Camino rather than the cruise.
Wow. Wow. Very moving. Well, I think this is maybe a good spot for us to take a pause, and I'm going to head over to the center, and I want to give everyone just a little bit of a tour because I know myself getting my last Compostela, it was easy to just kind of bypass all this. So I want to make sure everyone feels very comfortable and understands. All you got to do is tell the doorman that, hey, I'm going in to go to Mass or I'm going up to visit Camino Companions. So I want to show everyone that firsthand so they feel comfortable in doing so. So everyone stay tuned. I'll be doing a little tour and showing you maybe the poetry book and the sacred space and whatnot. Is there anything else you want me to make sure I show everyone?
Like, I think actually what you've mentioned, Lee, is really important because I've had people tell me getting past the security guards can sometimes be a challenge, particularly if people don't bring all their details. But if you mention Mass or Camino Companions, they're usually the words that get you right in. I think showing them the garden would be good as well, because sometimes people just don't do it. And the tourist office in the center, because a lot of people don't know that it exists. And then no, you didn't.
No, I didn't. I only found out what that was. One time I went over to the center to help someone with register a group, and I went to the wrong room. And then they said, "Oh no, we're the tourist center. You can get all the stuff for Finisterre. You can, there's a wealth of information in this building that I think is not known."
Exactly. And then at the very bottom of the building, you have the post office, and you have Alsa Bus and Mon Bus, where you can book tickets.
Really? Someone was just asking me that. So you can book your tickets down there?
Yeah, you can. Now, you can book online, but you can also get tickets there for Alsa, for Mon Bus, and you can post whatever you want to back home.
Wow. And then someone mentioned to me also the other day that there was a place maybe at Caritas where you could make donations. Is that accurate? Are you familiar with that? It's on the left-hand side as you're facing the center.
There is Caritas, where they, and that was part of the dream of the cathedral in setting up the new Pilgrim office, that they would also look after the homeless and the people who are really struggling in Santiago. So yes, that must be Caritas. I have to confess, it's only open this year. And when I was in Santiago, I didn't get a chance to call in, but I'm pretty sure just beside the Pilgrim office, there is Caritas, and I am sure they're more than delighted if they receive donations.
Okay, I'll pop over there during the tour and if they're open and see. I know one question I didn't ask you, Catherine, is the Camino Companions open year round, or do you tend to focus on the main Pilgrim season?
We focus on the Pilgrim season, mostly because of our own capacity. So we open up the week after Easter week.
Okay.
And we close the end of October.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking time out. I know you're super busy while you're there in London, and it's just been a pleasure to learn more about Camino Companions and your own Camino. So thank you for coming and sharing that.
You're most welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I can't wait to see you when you're back in Santiago. And I'll head over now to the Pilgrim office and give everyone a little bit of tour so they can see firsthand, and we'll go from there. And everyone, I just ask everyone again, if you like what you're hearing, if you personally have experienced what Sister Katherine is offering there at Camino Companions, be so kind to leave a comment on YouTube, or when I post this on the Facebook page, maybe make a comment and share your own story there, as well as share it with any English speaking folks that will be walking soon or in the next year, because this is a service that I think is much needed. And we are so lucky to have it here in Santiago. So we would really appreciate your help in getting the word out, because we kind of had this break with COVID, and I think they were really getting started, and there haven't been as many English speakers on the Camino so far, but I know that's going to increase next year, and more people need to hear about this wonderful opportunity that we have right here, so close to the cathedral. So, all right, well, we will catch up, Katherine, when you are back in town, and thank you so much.
Las cosas que necesito en la vida ya están aquí. Las cosas que necesito en la vida ya están aquí. I am free, free as a bird now, with my feathered wings. I am free, free as a bird now, with my feathered